Ahí, Ana, a tu lado, a tu lado.
Arratsaldeon guztioi eta ongi etorri da.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and let's commence the press conference of the film To Remember is Forbidden. And this film has been presented in Cinamira. This evening, it will be presented in the Cinamira Gala. An award would be given to Alex Angulo, the actor, and then you would have the possibility of seeing the film. Welcome to the press conference of the film To Remember is Forbidden, which will be shown within the festival, within the framework of the Cinamira, within the panorama of, which is an overview of the Basque cinema. Before introducing you to the components of the delegation that's going to present the film, I'm going to give the floor to the co-director of the festival, José Luis Rebordinos. I want to say a few words. Good afternoon, thank you very much for coming. And as you know, next year I'm going to be the director of the San Sebastian Film Festival. This celebration To Remember is Forbidden is a good opportunity to make the following announcement. We have the intention of having a close collaboration with Basque Cinema. In the first meeting after naming of the Cinemaldi, I will have the intention of collaborating with Basque producers, because the film festival has to be many things, and amongst it, it has to promote and disseminate Basque cinema. It has to be the festival of Basque cinema. I've asked to be able to present and to be at this press conference for two reasons. First of all, because as many of you know, next year, as of January, I will I will be the director of the San Sebastian Film Festival. My first words vis-a-vis next year, I want them to get to approaching it closer to Basque producers and Basque cinema. I think the San Sebastian Film Festival has to be a lot of things. It's got to be an encounter of a Spanish industry, of an international industry, where we demonstrate different ways of understanding cinema and the world and understanding life. But it also has to be a place of encounter, point of encounter for our industry and for our producers and our products. And as I was saying before, in January, when I undertake my role as director, one of the first things I'll do is to introduce Basque cinema and Basque producers so that we can get together, and in January we can start to work together vis-a-vis next year's edition. The second reason for which I wanted to be in this press conference is because in these times of cold political correction, I think it's important to present a film like this one, which is called To Remember is Forbidden, which precisely reminds us, even though it's a cliche, that societies that forget are condemned to repeat their failures and repeat their mistakes. And there are crimes against mankind that never prescribe. And I'm going to give the floor to the team of the film. Thank you very much, José Luis. I would like to ask both the young directors how the idea of the project of carrying out this project, because being so young as you are, you've wanted to tell this story, go back in time. Please, could you tell us a bit about this? Well, perhaps it's because we're young. Because this is why this story has attracted us, perhaps. We must say that we started 4 years ago to prepare this project, and it was initially work destined to the university, but we thought that it was worthwhile that this should be developed further on and that it should take shape, because we thought it was a story that should be shown to the audience and the public. When we go through sometimes we went through the Saturaran beach, we saw people sunbathing, and there's no buildings, there's nothing left of what the women's there was, and we thought we should allow people to know what had been there, and that's how we started our work. Jose Martinez and Chema Larratige, we've got the three of the protagonists, Alicia Solleiro, Ana Morales and Conchita Solleiro, and we want to welcome the three of them as well. And now let's start the questions, and you can ask questions whenever you deem pertinent.
Hola, muy buenas tardes y bienvenido.
Hi, good afternoon, welcome. It's a question for the women, the protagonists of this documentary, and unfortunately protagonists of that story that you had to go through. I would like to know whether you coincided in jail, whether you recognize, whether you knew each other and knew who you were, and how it was to feel, to be in front of the camera to tell the story of those memories. I'm going to try to answer you briefly. Ana was in jail, and Conchita and Alicia are daughters of Urania Amelia, who was also a prisoner in jail, and she has already died. So therefore I've said that so that you have an idea. Would you like to say something? I don't know whether you feel like saying anything. How did she feel in front of these two young people sharing those memories with them?
¿Quién hace las preguntas?
No, te preguntaba aquella chica.
Ah, no la he oído.
Bye. No, aquella chica te preguntaba que cómo fue para ti el recordar aquello y todo eso.
Ah, bueno, pues...
Very sad to remember all that, because you know what happens is you dream with it and you relive it again in your dreams. And then you remember it again. Sometimes, yes. There are some things that can't be forgotten. People that aren't here today and that you met them and who are very, very good people. And they have, because they've died, they don't have the chance to say it again. And it's a pity that I'm the only one left. Out of 2,000 women in Saturaran. And in Madrid, more than twice as much. More than 4,000 in a jail which only had room for 500, 4,000 people. And the younger people were the one that paid the most. And they were consumed, the young people were shot. None of the boys survived, those that were there that legally belonged to a political party or to a trade union. That was in Madrid, yes. That's very hard. It's very hard to live through that, yes.
¿Alguna pregunta más?
Any further questions? Well, it's surprising that all of a sudden two projects as regards to Saruraran jail have emerged. One is Isaren Artean, and yours, To Remember is Forbidden. And having seen the fiction film, when I saw the fiction film upon Saturaran, there was a series of questions in my mind were left. The more than questions, a series of doubts in my mind when I saw the film. When I saw your film, I saw it has helped me more to understand what took place in that jail, on the one hand, or in that prison. I felt I've been especially moved when I saw the document, because these were direct testimonies of what took place there, and the truth is, it has been quite moving and quite impressive to see this documentary. Secondly, having seen the film, when it was presented, they also said that in order to not make this, so that this event is not repeated again in history. Well, it seems that it sounds quite good, but it seems also, or it may seem, better said, that these were facts that took place in the past that to a certain extent had finished, or we were just going over things that had happened in the past. But the issue here is that here there are two issues that are of great interest. On the one hand, for example, the figure of Ayero Nájera, the psychiatrist and doctor of that period, who, under his mandate, carried out the classification of the prisoners, because the psychiatrist gave the names that of the prisoners and where they should be placed. Those types of people, those psychiatrists who played such a hard role, is it difficult? Well, they still exist in our surroundings. These are important characters and people who continue to survive, continue to live, and they still have names, and they still affect us to a certain extent. That is to say, something that's not taken place that has not occurred in other places. Another one of the points that I would like to underline is that during the transition period, they talk about the naming of the king, and they link this to what I perceive, and that is that what was in the past didn't stay in the past, and that past continues to maintain alive. It continues to be alive because we still see that the people here are afraid. And after Franco died, 35 years after his death, people are still afraid. Another point is that of the kids, the children. What happened with those children that were taken from there? These testimonies that I saw were very hard in the document. I would like to know more about it. And the third point, that mentions a person with Alzheimer who remembers the torture they went through at the Satararan prison. And this makes me evoke similar situations that people are going through today. Having said this, I would like to ask a question, bearing in mind everything I've said, and bearing in mind the new laws that have been promoted quite recently. What kind of setbacks or any help aid that you've received to carry out this work, bearing in mind that the jail and the building of the jail has disappeared? I would like to know about the difficulties and so on. Well, I'm going to answer only your last question, because I haven't taken down to the 3 points. When we started this work 4 years ago, the law of historical memory was not yet promoted. It had not been passed by the government yet. And this has not helped us, and neither has it caused any setbacks as people who want to do a documentary as we have. What I have perceived 2 years ago, the 70 years anniversary of the Civil War, all of a sudden it was fashionable to talk about the Civil War in the 70th anniversary, but like all fashions, it went by. It came and went. So therefore, if we look at the figures, at that period of time, thousands of associations were set up in Spain to talk about all of this. And the other day I was talking to one person from Forgotten Peoples Association. More than 3/4 of the association have dissolved, so they don't exist anymore. If you ask me what I think about the law of historical memory, well, I think it would be better for it to be answered by the people who promoted it, because at the end of the day it's a law which is made and thought of just for themselves. And I believe so. As regards this, along with the political transition, we thought that this documentary, visually speaking, I don't know how to say it, it had a point which was quite significant from our point of view. In that beautiful beach of Saturaran with those beautiful rock formations, nobody has, as Chabel says, no one could believe there was a prison there, or nobody knew there was a prison there, at least. And the physical evidence, they made them disappear. So therefore, those buildings that were demolished in the 1980s, almost 10 years after the death of Franco, everybody knowing what those buildings of the Saturaran prison represented and how important they were historically. So therefore, as you were saying, in my opinion, and that's my opinion, by the way, we've wanted to reflect. And we say 70 years, and it seems as if we were still in the Middle Ages, but that's not the case. It's a story which has endured up until the present day. And these women who were put into prison by Franco but were quietened and silenced during the transition period with that pact of silence that was set up at that time. And also, I mean, this was done consciously, this was done on purpose, and this is something that we always say. That is to say, more years have gone by since the death of Franco than since the jail was closed until Franco died. So I think these women, they have been more forgotten than what the dictatorship has been. Any further questions? Well, how has it been to shoot the film of the historical facts which are a bit far away from you because you've not gone through this period, and how did the idea emerge of shooting these historical facts? Well, we said this before. Because of the fact that we're this young and that we hadn't received that history. We know nothing about the Civil War. Well, we know what ends up in the history exam, but as isolated facts that have nothing to do with, or isolated events that have nothing to do with today's situation, what we wanted to do was to remember so as to understand today, at this present moment. And you're asking me what the process was like. Well, it's been a true pleasure that these ladies explain and tell us what they've gone through, and we feel very fortunate to be able to get to know what they've lived through firsthand, because in a few years' time others will not have that privilege. Two questions, a small curiosity. In the Saturaran jail, if you recall, once you've seen the film, there are many testimonies given, and they talk about some nuns there, but some nuns are mentioned. But I would like to say, when you talk about those nuns, or when you've tried to obtain other testimonies that it's not of those nuns, you've tried to obtain information outside the documents themselves, whether you've used any other authority of the time, or whether you've used any other institution or any heir of these group of nuns to see what really happened there. Well, to start off with it, the first piece of news was through him, because his father travels a lot through Motrico, and 4 or 5 years ago he wrote an article in the Gara newspaper talking about the Saspiti, talking about this event that took place in the prison. This is the first article that was written about the Saturaran prison. Carmen Morevio, who died subsequently, the father of Chavez, interviewed this woman who died, who was in Saturaran jail. I can't translate without a microphone. And the second question, yes, if you obtained any other testimony. Well, over 4 years, the truth is, we've thought about many other things, but it was one of our intentions to gather more information, but it's very difficult. Those nuns, that group of nuns, what kind of nuns were they? What testimonies could they provide us? Well, you can personally find what nuns were spent time in that prison, but the truth is, the interesting testimony, I'm not too sure whether it's of those nuns, because the truth is they were just pawns of the regime, the dictatorship regime. The truth is we would have to seek the people responsible for that hierarchy, people within the Catholic Church who are in charge. And it's very difficult. We have to bear in mind that if it's difficult to find the victims in themselves, those that were there in jail, in prison, it was very difficult and very arduous. Imagine if it was difficult to find the victims who spent time in prison. Imagine how difficult it was to find the executioners. I imagine to what extent that could contribute anything to events of that nature when we know that we give credibility to the victims. That a person who appears and may give another version, I'm not too sure why any other version should emerge. I'm not too sure whether that should be too fair or not. From the Cinemaldi, there are a lot of documentaries which have been quite important. What does the documentary have that fiction doesn't have when making a film, and also vis-a-vis the audience? Well, when one shoots a documentary, as we were saying prior to this, well, it has that direct tone of talking about historical events with people who have lived it in their own flesh and blood. For the audience, I think it is very powerful, the power of a direct testimony, because it's a person with flesh and blood, and they're talking about how they've suffered, and this gives a lot of reality and truth to the events that took place. How did you find production for the work? How do you confront the issue of production, of finding a producer? As I was saying at the beginning, the story emerged as a work for the university, and we had to prepare a script for a documentary. But once having done that, we said, well, it would be a pity, and given the fact that we've got a bit of work already done and a story that we have to let people know, and we got in touch with La Tentación, with Eneko and Asagasti, and they accepted the project, and they produced it between Rec, Tentación, and Mosto. Last year, we presented another documentary, which is Itxasoaren Arara, Itxasoaren Alaba, and Izanoen Membora, and the other two documentaries. We've done them in Basque, in Basque in Ausolan, that is to say, with everybody working voluntarily with last year 3,000 euros and 4,000 euros this year. So therefore, we wanted to see what it feels like when there's money to pay people, etc. Very little money to pay people, but yeah, we wanted to know what it would feel like. Any further questions? And what does it feel like to have money to pay people? Oh, it feels good. Congratulations and good afternoon. I want to ask you in Spanish, when you shot the film, what sources of information did you have? That is, how you documented yourself? Was it any process any things that you had difficulties in finding things, or any certain moments when you shot the film? Were there difficulties? Did you have setbacks and obstacles? Well, initially, it's enough work to find the women who spent time in that prison. So therefore, we didn't have a body or a specific book or anything that specifically would talk about this. So therefore, it was a documentary work in Barcelona. There's a book that talks about this case. And it was we worked in that manner, of finding things. Setbacks, well, the truth is all the documentation of the Sarturaran prison is at the Martutene prison, where we weren't able to get access to those files, because bureaucracy is bureaucracy, red tape is red tape. I don't know what it is, but at the end of the day, these processes take a long time, and so therefore at the end of the day, what we did was to ask for a certain amount of information. Some information got lost along the way. Other information, we don't know whether they exist or not. Other things people have had access to them before, so therefore nobody else can have access to them to see them. So therefore, all that documentation is difficult to achieve, and we don't know. We don't know what's hidden there, or whether there's anything hidden there, or where a lot of documentation of this prisoner never going to appear, or whether they didn't write anything at all about it. Allow me another question. You said that it became fashionable to talk about historical memory and the Civil War, but it seems to be a bit of a taboo. Did you find that people didn't want to talk about this, or? Yes. In some cases, we tried to get in touch with one of the prisoners who spent time in this prison, and she preferred to not appear in the documentary, as they say, because they were afraid to, or because they're very ashamed. There are people who feel a lot of fear still, and there are cases of there's a lot of shame because they've had to live almost hidden. I remember of a case that really hurt us. It was quite painful because we were able to get in contact with one of the women who had been prisoners there, and we called her up to see whether we could get together with her and meet her. And the daughter picked up the phone, and we talked to her. We explained who we were, that we wanted to talk with her mother and so on. So therefore, the daughter calls the mother. She was at home, and we were listening over the phone how the daughter said, "Mum, tell them you don't remember anything." What I mean by this is that these are issues which, as Chavez said, because of shame, it's something of the past. Let's not delve into the past. That hurt us quite a lot. That the subsequent, the younger daughters, they don't want their parents to talk to what they've lived through. And this documentary, what it wants to do is to break all of those chains, and also because it's always painful to remember something like that. This can be answered better by these ladies who are with us. It's painful to enter into those, to remember those events, and there may be people who don't want to go and go through that harder time. It is quite logical to a certain extent. I would like to say a few words, if you allow me. First of all, I want to thank these two young boys who have been courageous enough of wanting to remember, or trying to remember, which is not easy at all. So therefore, with great pleasure, I told them everything I knew. My mother had spent time in the prison from 1936 to 1945, and 2 months after that she died. What happened through me? Well, if I always think you can help other people, I always participate. And albeit I went through a really painful time, I believe that this, to a certain extent, just like these young boys, there will be some other people that will realize that this can't take place again. And I believe, or that it shouldn't happen again, and I believe in that in this aspect, I think it's quite positive. And secondly, I say I because I try to discover these things, my brother as well, but I did it through the anti-corruption, anti-Vice Carlos González Villarejo of restituting and recovering the names of my parents. But I can tell you that it took 3 months, and thanks to him, for them to give us the copy of the sentence, of the death sentence, because still, unfortunately, there are a lot of people within these institutions that are not interested. They're not interested for this to come out into the light and for anyone to know about it. But someone's got to do whatever one can. I can't do much more. I'm 80 years of age. Throughout my youth, and then as an elder woman, I did what my mother couldn't do, because my mother couldn't do it, but I did everything I could. And I went to demonstrations, many demonstrations I was involved in, organized political and trade union organizations. And I'm very happy to have done so, because I wasn't married, I didn't have any kids, and I could do what I wanted to. So therefore I did what I liked to do. And that's the way it goes. I can't say anything else. I liked it, and that's why I did it. I did it, and plus because I could, because nobody was telling me, don't do this, Mum, or don't do the other, or that lady, that woman or man, or went through hunger problems. And precisely the younger generations who are unable to assume what undertook. Well, it happened. It happened, ladies and gentlemen. As it happens, people should know about it. Yes, that's it. I'm not saying anymore. Anna, you wanted to say something. First of all, good afternoon to all of you. And I would like to say that I'm very happy for the success these young boys have achieved, who have had the courage to shed some light in putting to the public something that was very hidden in the past, because only those that have lived through that period know exactly, those events know what horror and terror is about. The prison in Madrid is where I suffered the most, because I was arrested in the month of August, and I was taken to trial on the 4th of December, when there were people who were already in jail for 1 year. They were very hurried, they were very quick to put me to trial, and I was given the death sentence. I considered myself, I thought they were going to kill me, like they've killed so many young people every day. Of the boys who were condemned to the death sentence because of the Association of Juventudes Unificadas, none of them were saved. Of the girls, the first people were the 13 Roses, and terror was given, and torture was given within the jail cells, that they couldn't say many things about that had taken place. And when I was arrested, I was taken to the Villamonte Street in Madrid, and there I had to report where I'd worked, what I'd done, and how I'd been there. I was interrogated, and I explained and told them the truth. I couldn't say any other thing. I'd only lived to work throughout the entire war. I don't even know what a cinema or going to a dance was. I worked in the workshops of the anti-fascist women making clothes for the army. The shirts, the trousers, and the overcoats. And I said that to the judge. I told that judge that. And they took me there. I was put in jail. The following day, I was taken to the Alisas. And in the Alisas, in the basement, before going into the basement cells where they registered your name and surname and where you were from and your age, and the person used to tell me, tell the truth. How old are you? And I said, well, listen, I'm 17, and I'm about to turn 18. Tell the truth, because it's in your favor, because I only represented I only looked like a 14-year-old girl, because I was very small, and of course, with the suffering of the news that you receive, and hearing the siren, like you see the siren that goes to the old person's home, but they were much louder when they went to pick somebody up and put them in jail. And when those sirens went by, you felt relaxed, but you ask yourself, who are they going to pick up? Who are they going to put in jail, in prison, until they really take you to prison? It seems that you relax a bit in prison. You couldn't even trust your friends in jail, because a lot of the people who were very, very revolutionary, at least that's what they said when they were arrested, they all turned into fascists. They weren't a left wing. Only those people that you really known, like the Tres Rosas, or the women that were judged on the same day that I was put in jail in Ventas, in Madrid. It was a group of young girls. The boys were killed all, and 3 were death sentence. Amporita Hernández. Nieves Torres also appears in the company, and Ia Jimeno. The rest, unfortunately, died. And so they are taken, when they were brought down from the trial, Emilia Recio, who was also there, had worked with me in the Ministry of Aviation, and I was in the Ministry of Transport as a clerk, and she was there to serve the officers in the officers' canteen or dining room, and that's where we met. And these were the ones that explained to me, with other companions, that they had killed the 13 Roses on the 5th And I got horrified because I knew that I was going to be shot as well. All of us were going to be shot. And they were taken to the jail in Ventas, and that is where I saw what that was all about. The cells were two-people cells because the jail in Ventas was built by Victoria Kane, the parliamentarian. It was built for 500 prisoners, but there were 4,000 women in that prison. And the yards and the corridors, the toilets, all of them had beds fitted out. We had a very small room for each of us. Whoever had a mattress, people who were a bit more delicate in health, they would take the mattress, but we had to sleep somewhere. We didn't have a mattress. Well, we would sleep on the floor. And then, after all of this, at 10 o'clock in the evening, I was called to go to the chapel. My son was feverish and he was shivering, and therefore at that time I was a civil servant. Well, and therefore I went to look for a nurse. They took the temperature, and I said, no, my son, the boy was almost choking. So therefore when I left at 10 o'clock at night, it was strange. The judges would have come along to take statements, and I said, you're being called for the judges. No, I was being called for the chapel, if you catch what I'm saying. And so therefore, seeing my son so ill, the nurse said, listen, Maria Teresa, I'm not going to take charge or responsibility for your son. I don't know who I've got to hand him over to. He has nobody to take care of him. And so therefore, when the nurse leaves and took the temperature again, and then she left and said, it could be that this boy may have saved his mother. And that's what the nurse said, because the nurse told me that later. Well, okay, I got into the ward again, and therefore in the month of February, March, I think it was March, or less, a judge comes along at 12 o'clock to take my statement. I went to the place to take the statement, and I said, well, let's see. He said, let's see. Where are you going to set your residence or your address? Residence or address? Yes, why? Because you're going to be free. Oh, whatever, why not? What have you done? Nothing. But I've been judged on the 4th of December, and I've been given the death sentence. That can't be for this. Yes, well, I imagine so. And I'm going to read it. He started to read that I was voluntary to the anti-fascist women workshops, and then we had gone to Manzanares de Ciudad Real, and we were transferred because of the bombings. And then, when Catalonia was lost, they mobilized, and exams were given to us, and I was sent to the Ministry of Aviation, to the Transports Office, as a clerk, and as an office assistant. And when the judge left, I was taken to court in the month of March, and the judge said to me that I can't be there with my son, that I've got to go down to the basement. I can't be there present at the same time. And when the women that had gone to the court with me, are you going to be freed? And I said, no, I don't think so. I don't believe it. I said, yes, because they've called the person who has reported you so that she can present proof or evidence, because all of the reports that you have of where you've been in Manzanares and in the Ministry of Aviation says are completely clean, so I don't know. I was told that my court case was suspended because of the lack of evidence again. I go back to court in the month of May, and I was told that I can't be in the room because the woman had reported me to present evidence again, because they didn't have any evidence. They couldn't have any evidence because anything that she was saying was not true. So therefore, I was told judges came down to console those that had been judged, and I asked, well, what have they said about me? And they said, as I wasn't there, I wasn't allowed to be in the court case. I said, I can't tell you because I don't know, but your death penalty has been suspended. And at the end of May, the director of the prison, Maria Topete, was the director of the jail, who was a marquise, I think. I was called to her office and said, I'm calling you to congratulate you. So congratulations, why? What? You've only got 20 years now. And I said, Miss Maria, I have not committed any felony, nor for 20 years, nor for a death sentence, nor even for 6 years, because I've never in my life harmed anybody. And why was I judged? Well, you know what I found out? When the young people who have sacrificed a lot of time to make the film, which was screened on Sunday, and when I was handed this information is when I knew who had reported me and what she had said. I had spent in a month when the war had commenced. I had a bank account with 400 pesetas in León. That's where I lived. And there was a man who was the CDA parliamentarian, because he went to look for me because the maid he'd had left because the boyfriend didn't want to be at home, but she'd already bought a ticket to go to Madrid because I'd been promised to get a job. So therefore, and I went to Madrid, but a person who I knew in my family asked for 200 pesetas because my daughter was going to get married. And I gave it to them, as ignorant as I was back then. I gave her the 200 pesetas. And she said, look, with the other 200 pesetas, and still you start to get paid when you've got enough to get by. And I believed it, and she was right. But we wrote to the street of Altamirano, to a person who, this lady had a pension, to see, or a hostel, to see whether she had any room for me. And she answered yes. So therefore, as I had a place to go to, and I had the 200 pesetas, and I was going to get a job, when I got there, it was all a lie. I had been fooled. Well, it was good on one hand because the 200 pesetas that I lent her after the 20 years in Saturaran, there were 25 mothers with 25 children. We were the first in Madrid who came to Saturaran. And in Saturaran, when we arrived, it was 9 o'clock at night, and the nun said that we couldn't go in because there were two people from the Guardia Civil to the northern station, and we were put on a carriage with both of them on each side, and in Deba we changed trains to go to Deba. There was a truck waiting, or a bus, which took us to Saturaran prison. We arrived at 9 o'clock at night, and the nun received us there, and she said we couldn't enter into the pavilion because they were in silence, that we should do whatever we wanted with our kids, and we weren't given even water to drink. And the next day in the morning, we were put in line, and they accompanied us into the Saturaran jail prison. We were taken to Pavilion 8, which was a seminary, and the tuberculosis patients were in the next pavilion. They were prisoners from León in Galicia that had kids, children that were 6 and 7 years of age, who had been in the Saturaran jails more than 4 years. We're sorry, Ms. Morales, we're sorry to interrupt your testimony, but we have to finish the press conference here. What I do believe is that we all should go to see the film this evening and listen to the testimony of Mrs. Morales and many others. What I would like, before we finish, is for you to tell us whether the film is going to be premiered tonight. Do you have distribution, or perhaps I should ask the producers? Well, let's hope you achieve and that we can also see it in cinema theaters. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much to everyone.